A heart that learned to love again. My journey back from loss. I know your pain. Hello, dear friend. If you found your way to this video, chances are your heart is hurting. Maybe you've lost someone you thought you couldn't live without. Maybe you're sitting in an empty house wondering who you are when you're not taking care of everyone else. Maybe you're convinced that the good parts of your life are behind you. I know because I've been there. 3 years ago, I was sitting in my kitchen at 2 a.m., unable to sleep for the third night in a row, wondering if this hollow feeling in my chest would ever go away. My husband Michael had been gone for 6 months, and I felt like I was slowly disappearing too. Everyone kept telling me it would get better. Time heals all wounds, they'd say. You need to get back out there. Easy words from people who still had their person sleeping next to them every night. But here's what I want you to know right up front. They were right, just not in the way I expected. It did get better. But not because the pain went away. Because I learned to grow around it. Not because I replaced what I lost. Because I discovered parts of myself I never knew existed. My name is Eleanor, and at 66, I'm living a life I never could have imagined. Not just surviving, but truly thriving. And if someone had told me that 3 years ago, I would have thought they were crazy. Today, I want to share my journey with you. Not because my path will be your path, but because sometimes we need to hear from someone who's walked through the darkness and found light on the other side. When everything falls apart, my story. Let me start at the beginning, or what felt like an ending at the time. Michael and I had been married for 35 years. We'd built our whole life around us, our routines, our friends, our dreams for retirement. When he died suddenly of a heart attack at 62, I didn't just lose my husband. I lost my identity. For months, I went through the motions. I'd wake up, make coffee for 1 instead of 2, and feel that punch in the gut all over again. Well-meaning friends would invite me to dinner parties where I'd sit there as the odd number, the reminder of everyone's own mortality. I kept busy during the day, volunteering at the library, having lunch with my sister, tending to my garden. But at night, when the house got quiet, the loneliness was overwhelming. I'd look in the mirror and think, who is this woman? Who is Eleanor without Michael? The worst part wasn't the grief. I expected that. It was the fear that this was it. That at 63, I was supposed to gracefully accept that my time for growth, for passion, for new experiences was over. That I should be grateful for what I'd had and settle into being everyone's sweet grandmother who lived alone with her cat. But something inside me rebelled against that story. Maybe it was stubbornness. Michael always said I was too stubborn for my own good. Or maybe it was what psychologist Carl Jung called the midlife transition. That calling to become who you really are, not who everyone expects you to be. If you're in that dark place right now, I want you to know, that rebellion, that tiny voice saying this can't be all there is, listen to it. It's not foolish or selfish. It's your soul insisting on more life, not less. The slow awakening, learning to live again. The turning point came about 18 months after Michael died. I was cleaning out his study and found a book I'd given him years ago, Carl Jung's Man and His Symbols. I'd bought it because I was interested in psychology, but Michael wasn't much for self-help books. It had been sitting there, unopened, all this time. That night, I started reading. Jung wrote about something he called individuation, the process of becoming your whole, authentic self. He said most people live the first half of their lives for others, building careers, raising families, meeting expectations. But the second half is different. It's about integration, about becoming who you truly are. Reading those words felt like someone had turned on a light in a room I didn't know existed. What if Michael's death wasn't just an ending? What if it was also a beginning? I started small. I joined a book club at the local community center, something I'd always wanted to do but never made time for. I signed up for a watercolor class. I'd painted a little in college but gave it up when life got busy with marriage and kids. These weren't just hobbies. They were what Jung called shadow work, reclaiming the parts of myself I'd set aside. The woman who loved intellectual discussions. The artist who saw beauty in everyday moments. The adventurer who'd always dreamed of traveling solo. At first, I felt guilty. Was I betraying Michael's memory by wanting things he'd never been interested in? But slowly, I realized, Michael had loved the whole me, even the parts I'd kept hidden. He would have wanted me to find them again. Finding the hidden parts of myself. Jung taught that we all have a shadow, not the evil kind, but the unlived parts of ourselves. For me, that shadow contained decades of suppressed dreams and aspects of my personality. There was the woman who'd wanted to take graduate courses in literature but chose to support Michael's career instead. The person who'd longed to travel but always deferred to his preference for familiar vacation spots. The part of me that craved deep, philosophical conversations but had learned to keep quiet about heavy topics at dinner parties. The biggest step came when I was 64. I booked a trip to Italy. Alone. Michael had never wanted to go. He preferred mountains to cities, quiet to chaos. But I dreamed of walking through Florence, seeing the art I'd only known from books. I was terrified. What if I got lost? What if I felt lonely? What if people judged a woman my age traveling by herself? But sitting in a cafe near the Uffizi, reading Jung, and sipping the best espresso of my life, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. I felt like myself. Not Michael's wife, not the kid's mother, not the capable woman everyone relied on. Just Eleanor. And for the first time in decades, that felt like enough. That trip taught me something crucial. We don't have to choose between honoring our past and embracing our future. I could love Michael's memory and love the woman I was becoming. They weren't contradictory, they were both true. The day love found me again. Now, if you're rolling your eyes thinking this is going to be some fairy tale about finding Prince Charming, hold on. That's not what this is about. But love did find me again, just not in the way I expected. I was back home, sitting in my favorite coffee shop, reading another Jung book, when a gentleman at the next table asked, "Fascinating choice. Are you familiar with his thoughts on the second half of life?" His name was Thomas. He was 67, a retired English professor who'd been widowed for 5 years. We ended up talking for 4 hours, about books, about loss, about the strange courage it takes to rebuild your life when everything familiar is gone. What struck me wasn't that he was attractive, though he was, or that he was intelligent, definitely. It was how completely myself I felt with him. I wasn't performing the role of a woman trying to be appealing. I wasn't hiding my interests or dumbing down my thoughts. I was just me. With Michael, I'd learned to be the version of myself that made our marriage work, and that was beautiful and good. But with Thomas, I discovered versions of myself I'd forgotten existed. The woman who could debate Sada over dinner. The person who wanted to learn Italian cooking. The part of me that wasn't afraid to be vulnerable about my struggles and dreams. Here's what I learned. When you've done the work of becoming whole on your own, you don't need someone to complete you. You get to choose someone who celebrates who you are while inspiring you to keep growing. What I've learned about love after loss. If you've lost a spouse or long-term partner, people might tell you that finding love again means you've moved on from your grief. That's not true, and it's not helpful. Grief isn't something you get over, it's something you grow around. My love for Michael didn't diminish when I fell in love with Thomas. It transformed. It became part of the foundation of wisdom and gratitude I brought to this new relationship. Love after 60 is different from love at 30. At 30, I was desperate to find someone to build a life with. At 66, I already had a life. Thomas didn't rescue me or complete me. He chose to share in the fullness of who I'd become. We both came to this relationship whole. We'd both survived profound loss, faced our mortality, learned to be alone without being lonely. That gave us a kind of courage that younger lovers often lack. We could be honest about our fears because we'd already survived our worst fears. We could risk our hearts because we'd learned that while heartbreak is painful, it doesn't actually kill you. We didn't need to play games or present perfect versions of ourselves. We shared our shadows with each other, our regrets, our health concerns, our complicated relationships with our adult children. And instead of being repelled, we found that this vulnerability brought us closer. The gift of starting over. At 66, I describe myself as more authentic than I've ever been. Not because Thomas loves me, but because I learned to love myself first. Our relationship didn't save me. It became a space where my wholeness could flourish. Jung taught that individuation is a lifelong process, and my relationship with Thomas became a catalyst for continued growth. We give each other permission to keep evolving, even in our 60s and 70s. I started teaching art classes at the senior center. Thomas returned to writing poetry, something he'd abandoned decades ago. Together, we've traveled to places we'd always dreamed of visiting. But separately, we maintain our individual friendships, interests, and identities. This is what love looks like when you know who you are, I told my daughter recently. It's not about losing yourself in another person. It's about being so secure in yourself that you can truly see and appreciate another person's wholeness. Thomas and I argue sometimes. We have different energy levels, different social preferences, different opinions about politics. But instead of trying to change each other, we've created space for our differences to coexist. We've learned what Jung knew, that love isn't about finding someone perfect, but about becoming someone capable of loving imperfectly but authentically. What I want you to know. So what do I want you to take from my story? Whether you're 45 or 75, whether you've lost a spouse or you're facing any major life transition, here's what I've learned. First, don't let anyone tell you it's too late for new chapters. Age doesn't diminish our capacity for transformation. It often enhances it. Every ending can also be a beginning if we are brave enough to see it that way. Second, do the inner work. Use this time of loss or transition to ask, who am I when I'm not performing roles for other people? What parts of myself have I kept hidden? What dreams have I deferred? It's never too late to retrieve these lost parts of yourself. Third, if you're seeking love, whether romantic or otherwise, seek it from abundance, not desperation. The most transformative connections come when we are not desperately searching for someone to complete us, but when we are living fully as ourselves. Fourth, be patient with yourself. Grief has its own timeline. Healing isn't linear. Some days will be harder than others, and that's okay. What matters is that you keep moving, even when it's just baby steps. Finally, remember that your story isn't over. The heart knows no expiration date. Your capacity for love, growth, and joy doesn't have an age limit. Sometimes our greatest adventures begin precisely when we think they should be ending. I'm not telling you to get over it or move on. I'm telling you to move forward, carrying your love and your losses with you, but not letting them define the limits of what's possible. 3 years ago, I thought my life was essentially over. Today, I wake up excited about what the day might bring. I have love in my life, not just romantic love, but love for myself, for my art, for the friends I've made, for the woman I've become. If you're in that dark place right now, please hold on. Your story isn't finished. The best chapters might still be ahead of you. And if this old woman can rebuild her life at 63, I believe you can too, whatever your age, whatever your circumstances. Be patient with yourself. Be brave. And remember, you're not alone in this journey. We are all just walking each other home, sharing our stories along the way. What chapter will you choose to write next?